Yes, please click where it says more and select your preferred language. This meeting is also being recorded, so please let us know if there is anything that you would like to be included in the recording. Buenos días a todos, todas. Estoy feliz para presentar este seminario desde la Ocean Coordination Mechanism. Mi nombre es Alejandro Gervan. Si tú quieres español, haga clic donde dice más y seleccionar su idioma preferido. Y con eso, with that, I think I'm going to open today's webinar. So it's my distinct pleasure today to open and moderate today's webinar, Rising Political Ambition for Ocean Climate Action. Ending with ocean climate action is poignant and important as it connects some of the most pressing existential issues of our time. Climate change is a menace currently present in our wider Caribbean region. Biodiversity collapse threatens our iconic species and the multiple ecosystem services that are essential to our Caribbean way of life, both socially but also economically. And our ocean is facing some of the most unprecedented challenges in how it's managed and how we relate to it because of this new frontier that is our high seas, the treaty related to it, and really because of our enhanced ability to extract marine sources through robotics and AI. But it's not all bad. Despite these challenges, significant opportunities exist along the climate, ocean, biodiversity, and sustainable development nexus. All of these opportunities are built on the foundation of healthy marine ecosystems, supported by ecosystem-based management and coordinated ocean governance. And any of you who've interacted with the Ocean Coordination Mechanism, you'll know that the SDG wedding cake is essential to the work that we're doing. And that basically says that the foundation to achieve the social and economic SDGs is a healthy environment. And of course, a healthy marine environment is a big part of that foundational part of the wedding cake. So for us, better articulating the connection between climate and ocean action through tools such as Blue NDCs, which you'll see presented today, are a pathway to enhanced climate, biodiversity, and ocean livelihood outcomes. We know that mangroves/wetlands, seagrasses, and coral reefs are amongst the most iconic but also threatened coastal ecosystems of the wider Caribbean. Yet they are essential in the provision of services for adaptation and mitigation of climate change and beyond. Services such as coastal protection, blue carbon sequestration, waste regulation, fisheries nurseries, but also fisheries, non-timber forest products, and tourism are just a few examples of the plethora of values we derive from the trifecta of interrelated ecosystems that are mangroves, seagrasses, and coral reefs. By linking the restoration of these coastal ecosystems to climate fixation or the storage of carbon material and the bringing of carbon material into the ecosystem, to global carbon finance, we get the ultimate package deal. Mitigated carbon emissions, along with these ecosystem services I listed earlier, and probably some ecosystem services that we don't even yet know about. And there we have to give thanks for nature's surprises. Recognizing the importance of these ocean climate linkages, the OCM and Partners are happy to have assembled a wide range of stakeholders involved in ocean climate action. From the champion countries of the Blue NDC Challenge, and we're happy to have France and Brazil, to organizations providing technical support at all stages of policy formulation to implementation. And today we have the World Resources Institute, Pew Charitable Trust, but also the NDC Partnership. This webinar will present ongoing work happening under the umbrella of Blue NDC Challenge, as I said, launched by France and Brazil, and ongoing work supported by Pew Charitable Trust under the Procaribe Project. And this is a project that supports the Ocean Coordination Mechanism. It would highlight the state of ocean action in NDCs, opportunities for countries to engage in these initiatives, and how partners can provide support to the challenge, but also wider ocean climate action. Ultimately, we here at the Ocean Coordination Mechanism are aiming to improve coordination amongst partners to enable experience exchange, but also ultimately coordinated action, joint fundraising, and enhanced ecosystem-based governance. And this is what the secretariat I work at is about. This is what the wider Caribbean Ocean Coordination Mechanism is about. It's created through over a decade of work from the region and funded by the Global Environmental Facility's International Waters Funding Line, implemented by UNDP. And this funding line is built on the recognition that the fragmentation of efforts and non-ecosystem-based management was and is one of the most significant threats to the health of our ecosystems and one of the greatest threats to ocean governance in the wider Caribbean region. We were formally operationalized in January of 2025, and this wider Caribbean Ocean Coordination Mechanism provides a permanent, inclusive structure for aligning action, sharing knowledge, and optimizing the use of limited resources, and this is donor resources, but also time and human resources of governments, by enhancing coordination and collaboration across the Caribbean and northern Brazil shelf large marine ecosystem. And that part's important. We are promoting ecosystem-based management and this idea of large marine ecosystems, which has been around for, I would say, I think, over 30 or 40 years. And you'll also see, well, Brazil is part of this webinar. I mean, why is that? The northern Brazil shelf is actually an integral part of the healthy functioning of the wider Caribbean ecosystem, because of course you have all of that, those freshwater and nutrient outflows coming from the Amazon and other watersheds. We count 21 countries and 9 IGOs of the wider Caribbean as our membership. And you're going to see in the chat box some information about the OCM through our website. And we aspire to have full membership of all eligible states and territories as soon as possible. And France and Brazil are, of course, eligible to join the OCM. With this webinar series, we recognize that on the road to our ocean conference and beyond, there was a need to coordinate wider Caribbean voices on a variety of topics. Our first webinar on the Global Biodiversity Framework 30 by 30 goal articulated how countries are working to advance marine-based preservation of our assets. The second webinar presented sustainable ocean plans, which are an essential tool for the sustainable management of our entire ocean space. Our third webinar was on ocean accounts, which is a key step in sustainable ocean plans, but also one of the most important ways we can measure for better management. And this fourth and final webinar on ocean climate action takes us big picture, connects our ocean action with, as I said earlier, this existential threat, but also really a fantastic opportunity for enhanced ecosystem preservation under the Trojan horse that is climate finance. With that, I thank you all so very much, and particularly thank the countries for their time and attention today. And we move to an introduction. I move to introduce our first speaker for opening remarks. And we're very lucky to have Mr. Tom Pickrell, the head of the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy at the World Resources Institute. We opened the webinar series with the head of the Our Ocean Secretariat, who also works with WRI. And I just want to make a plug here. It's great because Tom is speaking as the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel, so at the political level, but also the technical level, because WRI brings significant technical expertise to bear on this topic, but also it connects us back to the Our Ocean Conference. And it's our desire to have more countries join these challenges and announce their joining of these challenges or their intent to join these challenges at a side event that we'll be having at Our Ocean Conference in collaboration with the government of Jamaica. So with that, Tom, I'm going to hand the baton over to you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Alexander. So for a long time, the ocean was seen mainly as something to adapt to, a source of risk, vulnerability, and damage. But that framing is now changing because we understand much more clearly that the sustainable ocean economy is one of our greatest assets in the fight against climate change. And the science is compelling. Research commissioned by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, or the Ocean Panel, shows that ocean-based climate solutions could deliver up to 35% of the emission reductions needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and up to 47% of those needed to limit warming to 2 degrees centigrade. And at a moment where 1.5 degrees centigrade is slipping out of reach, We really can't afford to leave this opportunity untapped. But the value of ocean climate action is not only about emission reductions. Research from WRI and the OECD shows that real resilience comes not just from protecting coastlines and minimizing losses, but from creating the conditions for economies and communities to thrive under climate pressure. The ocean economy can help do that by providing diversification, food and energy security, and high quality jobs at a time where terrestrial space and opportunity are increasingly being constrained. Now, this is why blue NDCs matter. And NDCs are the national action plans that countries produce to show how they're delivering on the Paris Agreement. Now, our goal should be that by 2030, every island and coastal country is putting forward ambitious ocean targets across the full range of ocean sectors so that the ocean is used to its full potential sustainably to create prosperity and low carbon development. To get there, we need to show that when a country makes an ocean climate commitment, the finance, the technical assistance, the policy support, and planning support follow. The Blue NDC Challenge is therefore an important vehicle for that shift. And we are absolutely delighted and proud that France and Brazil, both Ocean Panel members, established the Blue NDC Challenge. The Blue NDC agenda is not just about better wording in climate plans, though. It's about stronger outcomes for people, nature, and economies, and about showing that ocean climate solutions can be scaled through real commitment and investment. This year's Our Ocean Conference in Kenya is a major moment to advance that agenda. It will be the first Our Ocean Conference held in Africa, which is a great thing on its own, but it brings global attention to African leadership and to the ocean climate, blue economy, and resilience priorities of coastal and island states. The conference is organized around 6 different areas: marine protected areas, sustainable blue economy, climate change, maritime security, sustainable fisheries, and marine pollution, all of which offer strong entry points for Blue NDC action. And just as important, Our Ocean is a commitments conference. Its main objective is to generate and implement ambitious concrete commitments. And Kenya is asking commitment holders to report on progress against their previous pledges. So that makes it a natural platform to strengthen the Blue NDC Challenge by linking national climate commitments to practical ocean action, implementation partnerships, and clear follow-up. You've got a really fantastic lineup of speakers today who can hear a lot about the technical detail and the background to this, and I very much hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom, for those remarks. Putting some numbers down, saying that the importance of blue climate action is actually increasing as we move away from 1.5. And then I also really love that you focused on this idea that resilience has many dimensions. It's not just environmental resilience, but there's also a social and economic aspect that Blue NDCs can support in these countries in the wider Caribbean in strengthening their economic and social resilience in the face of climate change. So, Tom, thank you so much. You really have put us on the right track. Also recognizing that this conference is a big platform for countries to mobilize additional support to take the policy to action, and that you guys are also there to help them alongside this. Thank you so much, Tom, for those rousing opening remarks. And with that, we move into the next part of our program. We've structured today to start with 2 political calls to action from the leaders of the Blue NDC Challenge. And then we will move to some technical awareness-raising presentations to make sure that you guys understand the nuts and bolts, the what and the how of Blue NDCs, but also ocean climate action. And then to a brief panel discussion. Please be prepared if you have any questions, put in the chat box, which I will be able to put towards our panelists. Now, with that, we're very lucky to have a high-level speaker today from France, in the form of the Special Envoy for Oceans and Poles, Mr. Olivier Deavois, who is going to be giving us some ambition-raising remarks on this important topic of ocean climate action. So, Ambassador Deavois, I know you're here. I'm going to hand the baton over to you.
Merci à vous. C'est le moment de la petite leçon de français. Pour ceux qui peuvent actionner la traduction, d'abord vous dire le plaisir d'être là. Comme vous le savez, déjà ce lien entre l'océan et le climat a toujours été une priorité pour mon pays et Et la semaine dernière, nous avons célébré les 10 ans de la signature de l'accord de Paris. Un accord qui reste à ce jour celui qui a reçu le plus grand nombre de signatures en une seule journée. L'année dernière, d'ailleurs, nous avons, nous, les diplomates français, obtenu les ratifications nécessaires pour l'entrée en vigueur de cet accord BBNJ, vous savez, sur la haute mer, qui accueillera sa première conférence des parties en janvier prochain aux Nations Unies à New York. Alors, deux accords importants, l'un sur le climat, l'autre sur l'océan. Une réalité, c'est qu'un avenir durable nécessite à la fois un océan sain et un climat fonctionnel. Rappelez-vous, l'accord de Paris affirme que nous devons assurer l'intégrité de tous les écosystèmes, y compris l'océan et la protection de la biodiversité. C'est pourquoi, 10 ans après Paris, nous avons organisé cette conférence des Nations Unies sur l'océan, l'UNOC 3 à Nice, où avec le Brésil, nous avons lancé le Blue NDC Challenge. En tant que président de la COP 30 à Belém, le Brésil était évidemment un partenaire très important pour lancer cette initiative. Merci au docteur Prates qui est ici avec nous pour votre travail et celui de toute votre équipe. Nous sommes également soutenus par plusieurs ONG, la World Resource Institute, la plateforme Océan Climat et Ocean Conservancy. Alors on pourrait se demander pourquoi faire équipe avec des ONG dans une initiative construite sur des engagements gouvernementaux. Tout simplement pour la même raison que celle pour laquelle nous avons très largement ouvert les portes de l'UNOC 3 à la société civile. Parce que ces questions concernent l'ensemble de la société et que nous aurons besoin de tout le monde à bord pour mettre en œuvre nos engagements et notre ambition. Alors, en quoi consiste le défi? En termes simples, il s'agit d'intégrer l'action climatique durable basée sur les océans dans nos plans climatiques nationaux, les NDCs, les contributions déterminées au niveau national. Il s'agit bien de placer l'océan au cœur de notre lutte contre le changement climatique. Alors, qu'est-ce que nous entendons par action climatique basée sur les océans? Vous savez que l'océan absorbe déjà environ 25% des émissions mondiales de CO2 et plus de 90% de la chaleur excédentaire générée par les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, jouant un rôle tampon dans le système climatique. Les actions climatiques basées sur l'océan sont des outils essentiels mais sous-évalués pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre et mieux s'adapter aux impacts du changement climatique. Ces outils doivent être durables, éthiques, sans risque et efficaces, en évitant les soi-disant solutions qui en sont encore à leur balbutiement et impliquent de nombreux risques tels que les techniques de géo-ingénierie, d'élimination du dioxyde de carbone marin. Nous devons donc nous concentrer sur celles qui ont le plus grand potentiel pour réduire les émissions et offrir d'autres avantages significatifs. C'est pourquoi le défi se concentre principalement sur la gestion, la conservation, la restauration durable des écosystèmes côtiers et marins tels que les mangroves, les herbiers marins et les marais salants. Mais aussi, ce défi se concentre sur la sortie progressive des extractions pétrolières et gazières offshore et le développement d'énergies marines renouvelables. Il s'agira évidemment de décarboner et adapter les industries maritimes, comme le transport maritime, qui représente environ 3% des émissions mondiales, mais aussi le tourisme bleu, toutes les chaînes de valeur et d'approvisionnement de la production alimentaire aquatique. Enfin, il nous faudra promouvoir une pêche et une aquaculture durable et résiliente au climat, c'est-à-dire les moyens de subsistance de près de 600 millions de personnes dans le monde. Alors, qu'avons-nous accompli jusqu'à présent? Premièrement, nous avons été rejoints par 16 autres pays, je ne les citerai pas tous, qui représentent 5 continents et des économies différentes. Mais pas encore d'îles des Caraïbes. Pourtant, les petits États insulaires sont à l'avant-garde des impacts climatiques et vous faites également preuve d'un véritable leadership dans le multilatéralisme climatique. Alors, vous faire participer au Blue NDC Challenge serait un beau signal en amont de ce qui s'annonce être une grande COP bleue. Deuxièmement, nous avons aussi lancé un groupe de travail, une task force lors de la COP 30. Ce fut l'occasion de prendre de nouveaux engagements pour l'océan et le climat. Ainsi, les NDCs de l'Union européenne raffirment que l'océan est essentiel pour l'énergie, les données, les ressources stratégiques. Elle rappelle également que le réchauffement de l'océan, qui provoque l'élévation du niveau de la mer et constitue une menace importante pour nos écosystèmes et nos stocks de poissons, nécessite une action urgente. Alors, rejoindre le Blue NDCs Challenge vous permet d'être soutenu par nos partenaires dans la promotion de toutes vos actions et la communication de ces engagements. Vous aurez aussi accès à un soutien technique pour améliorer les solutions climatiques durables fondées sur l'océan. Les avantages sont nombreux et encouragent le partage de l'expertise et des connaissances, la mobilisation des acteurs non étatiques pour soutenir la mise en œuvre et qui attire potentiellement des investissements. Les envoyés climatiques du Brésil et de la France ont organisé une réunion en ligne début avril avec leurs homologues pour définir une stratégie en vue de la COP 31. Nous avons partagé nos attentes pour aller de l'avant. Nous avons mis l'accent sur la nécessité de renforcer les capacités et de susciter un engagement politique. C'est pourquoi la France continuera de faire pression pour que cette économie bleue durable ne laisse personne de côté dans la perspective de la future COP 31 et de la future COP 1 de la haute mer. Le lien océan-climat fera partie du sommet Africa Forward, où nous espérons que des actions concrètes soient avancées pour la décarbonation du transport maritime. Enfin, la France restera déterminée au sein de l'Organisation maritime internationale pour soutenir l'adoption d'un plan mondial de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Nous comptons alors sur vous pour nous aider à atteindre un résultat ambitieux d'ici la session extraordinaire de novembre 2026 du Comité de l'environnement de l'Organisation maritime internationale. Nous savons combien les petits États insulaires et tous ceux qui dépendent de l'océan pour les économies œuvrent pour que soient proposées à cette COP des solutions concrètes. C'est pourquoi nous espérons pouvoir unir nos forces et mettre plus d'océans dans les négociations le climat et réciproquement. Alors je vous dis à bientôt à Mombasa pour Our Ocean en juin prochain et espère alors pouvoir compter sur vous parmi les membres du Blue NDC Challenge. Merci à vous.
Ambassador, thank you so very much for those words. I can't believe it's been 10 years since the Paris Agreement, but you've showed us that a lot of work has been happening since then. You know, France had this vision with the Paris Agreement, but you also connected it with Nice and you also connected it to Brazil in the Belém COP. So you're showing how the work is continuing. And it's really exciting to hear that 16 countries are participating in the challenge. But of course, you made a call to action, and hopefully more will join and use the Our Ocean Conference as an opportunity to also do so. It's also really heartening to see the connections you're making with important topics that are important for the Caribbean region, such as decarbonization of fishing, of course, of shipping. Sorry, of course, we're very involved in that industry through our ports, but also flagging of vessels. But also this idea of blue tourism, which is a direction that we have to go because it's such a big part of our economies. And then fisheries, okay, maybe not the largest part of our economies, but still very much a part of Caribbean identity. And of course, France knows because of Guadeloupe and Martinique and other territories in the region, how much it forms a part of the Caribbean identity. So, Ambassador, thank you so very much for making those connections from Paris. And we look forward to the next Our Ocean Conference. And then the next UNOC Beyond. This work doesn't stop. These are all stepping stones. And I'm happy that we're making this opportunity, using this opportunity.
Thank you, Alexander.
Fantastic. Okay, great. As we said, we went from Paris to Nice to Belém. And at the Belém COP, a big connection was made between this ocean climate work. And we're very lucky to have today the Rectora, Ana Paula Prates, the head of the Department of Ocean and Coastal Management within the Secretariat of Climate Change and the Government of Brazil, and really one of the driving forces behind the Blue NDC challenges and this work to connect oceans and climate. Directora, are you here with us? I think you are.
Yeah. Yes. Good
Okay.
morning, everyone.
Morning. Okay, so I'm controlling your presentation.
Okay.
You just tell me when to go next.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alexander. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you all on this webinar. And I very thank you to the organizers for our invitation. As you said, my name is Ana Paula Prates. I am a Director of Ocean and Coastal Management at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Brazil. And I'm going to briefly explain how Brazil incorporates ocean-based action in our NDC and all the steps we are taking to place the ocean at the center of international and national climate policies. You can pass. Okay, thank you so much. First of all, it's important. We need to highlight the central role of the ocean in regulate the planet's climate and the cross-country contribution to ocean health to activate the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework from CBD. There is growing international ambition to protect in the history the ocean and provide a sustainable and resilient blue economy. It is imperative to protect the ocean and the service it provides to the planet. And the fight against climate change is completely inseparable from the conservation and restoration of the ocean health. And of course, as Alexander said, marine and coastal habitats, coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass, and tidal marshes provide a range of ecosystem services that are critical for climate change adaptation and resilience, as well maintain vessel storage of sequestered carbon. Could you please next slide? Great. Here I have included a briefly timeline for you to showing just how recent the inclusion of the ocean theme in the UNFCCC has been. It was only at the COP25 that there will be a decision was adopted mandate the ocean climate dialogue in the substance, even through IPCC publication and reports had already highlighted the climate emergence and the rise in the ocean temperatures. You can pass another one. As a result of the first ocean climate dialogues, the need to conserve coastal and marine ecosystem to restore the health of the ocean and its capacity for climate regulation was included in the GST, Global Stocktake. And more recently, in 2024 and 2025, countries began to use to integrate ocean-based solution into their NDCs. And of course, into our National Adaptation Plan and others UNFCCC process, as well as into the National Biodiversity Strategy, NBSAPS. And in 2025, as Dr. Olivier said before, Brazil and France, at UNOC 3, Brazil and France launched the Blue NDC Challenge, encourage other countries to include ocean-based solution in their NDC. Next one, please. At the COP30, the ocean was a central theme in the various segments, initiatives, and events, ranging for the high-level segment to integrate into a negotiation topic as, for example, in the GGA, it's about the indicators of adaptation goal targets and program, in the mitigation work program, as well in the Stand Committee of Finance, and the next forum about the finance in this year is about water and ocean. And for, of course, in the civil society mobilization and the great opportunity that we presented in the actual agenda, the blue package is integrated of all the actions about ocean breakthroughs and other mobilize other package for the civil society, international civil society, and the Actavians group into integration in the blue package. It's very, very nice, I think, this result. Next one. But it is important to note that the key to combat climate change is, of course, phasing out of fossil fuel. We all agree with this. But we need to highlight that when consider ocean health, it is also important to emphasize that we cannot simply decarbonize using inappropriate methods that further impact the ocean. Therefore, we believe that ecosystem-based marine spatial planning, for example, should be a strategy to optimize decarbonization in a way that restore ocean health. Next one, please. For this reason, we began to encourage countries within the G20 presidency in 2024 in Brazil, and we stimulated to promote and support for development comprehensive marine spatial planning integrated coastal zone management for the countries, and we stimulate to ratify the BBNJ treaty and include ocean-based action in their NDCs. Next one, please. So at the COP29, Brazil presents its new NDC, which is ambition and align with the 1.5 degrees targets. And for the first time, we include ocean-based action as a part of its implementation at mitigation and adaptation part for us, especially our national public policy like a Manguezal, it's a program for mangroves. Coral is a national strategy for coral reefs in Brazil and marine spatial planning. Additionally, we also include this action at our NBCEPs, ensuring it aligns with the ocean-based action already included in the National Climate Plan. Next, please. These are examples of ocean-based action that can be included in the NDCs. And for example, of course, we can highlight the marine spatial planning, and there are a range of action that provide benefits for climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. We widely contribution to the development of the sustainable and the resilience blue ocean-based economy. And we can highlight, of course, marine protected areas, mangrove and coral reef conservation, habitat restoration, sustainable management of fishery and aquaculture. Next one. Here you can be just a brief summary of our Brazil's climate plan is in the path to activate our NDC, where we have 23 ministries that are members of Interministerial Committee on Climate Change, have developed and agreed upon 6 sectoral mitigation plans, 16 sectoral adaptation plans that include the thematic plan for the ocean and coastal zone, and 5 additional cross-cutting strategies. Next one, please. And here is a brief overview for you of the Ocean and Coastal Zone Plan, which encompasses everything for conservation efforts as the program that I mentioned before for mangrove, for coral reefs, to empowerment and of our traditional communities, to ecosystem resilience initiatives, and issues related to coastal and ocean conservancy as marine spatial planning and the integrated coastal management. Other one. And here is just to know about our NBCEP construction in the same ocean-based action were incorporated. Another one. Similar, the Brazilian government has reaffirmed its commitment at UNOC 3 by reinforcing the public policy it is implementing, which are included in the climate plan. Another one. And as Dr. Oliver said before, it was a great moment at the UNAC 3, Brazil and France, where launched the Blue NDC Challenge, encouraged other countries to include ocean-based solutions in their NDCs. Next one. And here it's another examples of ocean-based action that can be included in NDC, and it is exposing the documents about the Blue NDC challenge. Another one. And during the COP30, Brazil and France are announcing support for the creation of Ocean Task Force. It is a global mechanism designed to accelerate the integration of ocean-based solutions in national climate plans as a direct continuation of the work initiative started through the Blue NDC Challenge. And as Dr. Oliver said before, the launch of Ocean Task Force will take place during the Our Ocean Conference and the COP31. We are all connected, and the health of the ocean matters to all of us, because that's I agree, and I want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to share our initiatives and the successes for the webinars. Thank you.
Okay, Directora, thank you so very much again for really encouraging remarks and also for going into the details of what your Blue NDC looked like and how Brazil is leading the way on Blue NDCs. The word resilience came up again and again and again in your presentation, and I think that's really heartening because that's kind of what this is about, not just climate resilience, but other forms of resilience. It's a bit shocking to think that oceans were only integrated into IPCC in a formal way in 2018. That's pretty recently, but there's a lot of work that we have to do looking forward. So I think it's exciting to see how quickly things developed. Moved really quickly from going on the agenda to becoming this challenge. Also, you spoke about civil society integration, which is exciting today because we do have people participating from civil society so that they can understand how they can get involved. You said something very briefly, but I think that's very important to this topic, which is that we have to learn from the mistakes we made in the climate change space and not try and shift those changes to the ocean. This is not about, and I love this phrase, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and we can't shift the brown that's in the climate to the blue. And then as well, you said that this task force is coming, which I think is great. This idea of stepping stones we're building. And hopefully we see more country flags from the Caribbean on those 16 countries by the time we meet again. So thank you so much, Directora. I'm going to move to our next presentation. And we have today Michelin Khan, a Senior Associate for Ocean Climate at WRI. When Directora put up her picture of the launch of the Blue NDC Challenge, Michelin was right there. So she's providing technical support. We're really happy to have her, another member from WRI. So Michelin, I'm going to pass it over to you to give us some of the nuts and bolts of Blue NDCs. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. If you can see my screen, just give me a thumbs up.
We
Perfect.
can.
Amazing. I just feel like as many people know on this call, we've reached a really pivotal point in global climate action, one that's defined more by proof of implementation rather than just commitments. And as mentioned before, this kind of new generation of NDCs with 2035 targets, or NDCs 3.0, they offer kind of the clearest window into how countries are turning ambition into these measurable climate actions, and the role of ocean solutions, like Dr. Ana Paula Prats has mentioned, offshore renewable energy, blue carbon protection, green shipping, all of those in climate mitigation and adaptation has never been clearer. And these ocean-based solutions offer really significant yet underutilized opportunities to reduce emissions, to build resilience, and to support sustainable development, particularly for coastal and island communities that are represented on the call today in the Caribbean. And integrating these solutions into NDCs or national implementation plans is not just this environmental imperative, right? But it's an economic and social one as well. And we can all recognize that the challenge before us right now is moving from ambition to implementation. And that's precisely why the Blue NDC Challenge, now Task Force, really matters. And I'm just going to go to the next slide here, which just shows that the challenge was launched at the UN Ocean Conference, as mentioned earlier, by Brazil and France, but it's co-chaired by Ambassador Carlos Causendi and Ambassador Benoit Falco from France and Brazil. And it was initiated to build this political momentum and capacity to include ocean targets and measures in countries' NDCs ahead of COP30 in Brazil. But the co-chairs wanted to take it one step further and ensure that countries who become members have access to resources and support that they need to actually implement those commitments. And so the challenge transitioned into the Blue NDC Implementation Task Force. And I won't spend too much time again because it's been covered a little bit, but this task force is essentially designed to bring together governments, experts, and partners to bridge gaps between policy and practice, between technical knowledge and on-the-ground action, and between ambition and delivery. And through this collaboration, this knowledge exchange and targeted support, this group is really here to help unlock practical solutions, to strengthen capacity, and to accelerate progress. And one of the really important things that I want to stress is it's not here to recreate the wheel. We're going to build on and leverage existing initiatives, tools, funds, and resources to be a powerful accelerator. And for example, one of the other initiatives that we leverage and work with is NDC Partnership, for example, who I know is represented on this call. And as of this month, the task force is made up of several members with new entrants that are going to be announced at the 2026 Our Ocean Conference that's hosted by our member country, Kenya, which is very exciting. And what I'm going to focus on in this presentation is actually mostly going to be on the kind of analysis. And so the task force is really grounded in our comprehensive analysis of ocean actions and NDCs and the sectoral challenges. And I'm going to walk you through a bit of a snapshot of what these new NDCs reveal about the ocean, right? That it's still very underutilized, but a really strong climate ally. And this report was led by the World Resources Institute, the Ocean and Climate Platform, and Ocean Conservancy. We also had authors from NDC Partnership, Oceans 5, FAO, and TNC. And this takes a really forward look at how coastal and island countries are integrating ocean-based climate actions into their 2025 NDCs, focusing on ambition, equity, and implementation readiness. And it offers insights that are really going to inform stronger ocean climate policy going forward. And we're in the process of producing an updated report that's going to be launched ahead of COP31 as well, which will be a really exciting time to showcase a lot of this data. And so we're going to dive into some of the key findings. And so the first one is that ocean actions are rising, which we've been talking about in this whole presentation. So we know that ocean-based climate solutions are increasingly visible in national commitments, and they're showing this really strong upward trend. So this comes as no surprise because we've been seeing this uptick year on year. In 2015, our analysis showed 62% of coastal and island NDCs included ocean-based actions. By 2022, that rose to 73%. And as of COP30, 90% of submitted ocean and coastal NDCs now include them so far in this NDC cycle. And again, this analysis is ongoing. And this upward trend really signals kind of that growing recognition of the ocean's importance as a climate ally. And this momentum really has to translate into meaningful implementation. And so if we go into our key finding number 2, is that the mitigation gap is still very critical. And despite the ocean's potential to deliver up to 35% of global emissions reductions that are needed to reach 1.5 degrees, ocean-based mitigation is still underrepresented, and particularly in high-impact actions. So that's expanding offshore renewables, decarbonizing shipping and aquatic food value chains, and phasing out offshore oil and gas. And these just account for only 12% of ocean mitigation actions that were found in the NDC 3.0s that were analyzed. And so when we look at our next key finding, and I'm keeping them very short and quick as we move through this, but is that countries really need targeted support. So we found that 19% of countries requested ocean-related support through the NDC partnership. And this was most commonly for developing studies and analysis and engaging stakeholders. And this trend really reflects a key implementation challenge, which is a lack of baseline data on the ocean's role in climate mitigation and the need for stronger coordination and stakeholder engagement before scaling MRV and M&E monitoring and evaluation systems. And if we go to our last key finding, is that the latest NDCs show some progress on adaptation. In fact, over 90% of ocean actions focus on adaptation, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and Oceania. Yet the pace and scale of action remains far too low to protect vulnerable communities and livelihoods. And the gaps in technology and knowledge transfer are really holding back effective action. And what's alarming is that it's just 13% of ocean-based actions that explicitly address equity, even though women, youth, and Indigenous people in local and coastal communities are often hit the hardest by climate impacts. And so in terms of our call to action, these findings show a really clear momentum, but also a clear next step for us. The next 5 years really have to focus on deepening ambition, closing equity gaps, and moving from plans to implementation. And this highlights why the task force is really critical as we onboard delivery partners and orient existing facilities and tools to build a Blue NDC implementation toolkit for members and to close the gaps and overcome the challenges that they face in implementing NDC measures. And so with that, I will say thank you very much, and please feel free to reach out if you would like to engage more on the Blue NDC Challenge Now Task Force, or if you have any further questions. Thanks so much.
Nicolene, thank you so much for that, giving that call to action that's not just for countries, but also for experts and other people participating. It was, again, heartening to see how quickly that recognition of the ocean as a climate ally, I really like that you said that, grew from 60 to 90% so quickly. But also this gap in terms of technology and information transfer, capacity building that we need to fill. And it's definitely a gap as well in the wider Caribbean region. And then, of course, this idea of gender, youth, and equity. I know, as somebody from the Caribbean, a lot of people who live adjacent to mangrove areas are facing some of the most challenging socioeconomic conditions in the countries that we operate in, despite being guardians of this thing that's so important. So addressing these gender, youth, and equity issues are also so important. So thank you so very much. And I hope you have a lot of people coming to you with questions and requests for additional support, because you're clearly giving such good support. We have one more presentation before we move into our brief panel discussion. And this one is from Mr. Thomas Hinckley, a project director in the Advancing Coastal Wetlands Conservation Project at the Pew Charitable Trusts. As I said earlier, you will also see above me the Procaribe Plus logo. This is a JEF International Waters and UNDP project being implemented in the region that supports the ocean coordination mechanism, so ocean governance, but also has a lot of on-the-ground action showing the benefits of enhanced collaboration and coordination in the wider Caribbean region. One of those on-the-ground actions is being done through a co-executing agreement with Pew Charitable Trusts. So we're super happy to have Tom here to talk about that work that Procaribe is providing financial support for that is related to Blue NDCs in about 5 countries. So Tom, thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much for your presentation today, and I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm grateful if you could also give me a thumbs up so you can hear me. And then I will let Alex bring the slides up if possible.
You're good. Just give me 1 sec, Tom, to bring your PowerPoint.
Not a problem. And thank you to the thumbs up.
Here we go.
So just while Alex is doing that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Hickey. I am the project director for a body of work at the Pew Charitable Trusts. We're headquartered in Washington, DC, but as you can hear, I'm a Brit. I'm based just south of London and very fortunate to be working on a global project. We can jump straight to the next slide, Alex. So what is that work? What is that project at Pew and how do we go about it? We've been running since 2019 and we focus, as you've heard a little bit about already, on these blue carbon ecosystems and the inclusion of those ecosystems in NDCs. I would certainly echo my colleagues who've talked previously about that rising ambition, that awareness of the role of these coastal wetlands in climate strategies, but we've already given a lot of thought and a lot of time since 2019 to what practically do countries need to enable that ambition? How can we play a role in translating that recognition of potential into concrete action? And we very much look at that from the perspective of blue carbon ecosystems. The kind of original interest, both at a political and also financial level in these ecosystems for a climate perspective, definitely began with blue carbon. That lightning rod, however, has definitely translated into a broader awareness of our larger suite of benefits for adaptation and resilience. It's also, we believe, that using the UNFCCC and NDC is a new policy pathway, but a necessarily new one. There are a range of both national policy frameworks, but also multilateral accords that are relevant to coastal wetlands. But sadly, we have and are continuing to lose these ecosystems. How does Pew go about that work? We set up in-country partnerships that really focus on strengthening some of those capacities, those research, those policy outreach, technical capacities that are necessary to implement NDCs. We do not want paper political commitments. We want to make sure that at the point an NDC is submitted, it has a foundation of implementation support that will mean we can move swiftly to the kind of action we've heard about already. And some of these capacities, of course, are baseline conditions to realize climate finance. Perfect. Where have we been doing this work? Really focused in two regions, in Latin America and Caribbean, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, but also in the Western Indian Ocean. The project began in 2019 with 3 partnerships in Seychelles, Belize, and Costa Rica. And in each of those countries, we've now worked through 2 NDC cycles. And in 2022, we expanded our partnerships in the Latin America Caribbean region to Jamaica, Honduras, and Panama, and to Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar. I'm going to speak a little bit more now about some of the work we've been undertaking in Latin America Caribbean, but of course, happy to respond to any colleagues here on the West Indian Ocean work as well. Next slide, please. So in Belize, as I say, this was one of our founding country partnerships. We began in 2019, and you'll see on the screen here a whole range of commitments that have been included both in the NDC 2.0 and 3.0 commitments, including very specific, very measurable targets for mangrove conservation and restoration, as well as a more qualitative target towards the development of a national seagrass strategy. With our partners on the ground there, principally WWF, the University of Belize, and Smithsonian, we've undertaken a range of work to support those government ambitions, including the first national mangrove carbon stock assessment, as well as land tenure analysis. Mangroves are actually predominantly found on private lands in Belize, which is a challenge we see in many countries. The financing mechanisms that we have been exploring to support those conservation actions reflect that land tenure, including thinking about the types of financing arrangements to incentivize private landowners, as well as a climate smart mangrove restoration action plan. And the first, as we're aware in the region, peatland mapping and carbon stock assessment. There's obviously an importance in seeing the contiguous nature of some of these ecosystems, and actually looking inland to peatland and the impacts that has on mangroves in particular is an area of interest for us going forward. Next slide, please. So Costa Rica was the second of our founding country partnerships in the region. I doubt anyone needs much education on the conservation credentials of Costa Rica, but the NDC that was submitted in 2020 and again last year included very specific, very ambitious goals to both conserve and restore wetland ecosystems. Working from a very strong base there with our partners, Conservation International, Costa Rica, and others, we provided, again, research and technical support looking to update those mangrove habitat maps and carbon stock values, but also building out more swiftly potential opportunities to finance them. I'm sure many of you will be aware that there is a very successful terrestrial payment for ecosystem service scheme in operation in Costa Rica. We've worked with the government and others there to expand that to include a payment for marine ecosystem service methodology, as well as helping government think about the costs of certain activities. Costa Rica was also one of the first countries, not only in this region, but in the world, to develop a national blue carbon strategy and associated action plan. We know that these ecosystems provide a huge range of benefits to people, but that also necessarily entails a huge range of interests that need to be more effectively coordinated. And more recently, we've been working on how do we think about some of the digital platforms that can be more efficient for MRV purposes, as well as educational outreach in country. Honduras was one of the partnerships that we set up in 2022 ahead of the 2025 NDC update. And you'll see here that the commitments on screen, they're focused on the expansion of conservation areas, but also the improvement of existing management. A huge number of mangroves and wetland ecosystems in Honduras fall within protected areas, but are sadly not in the condition that the government wants them to be. Working with Centro de Estudios Marinos and Smithsonian, we provide a lot of technical support to government on those policy pieces, but also trying to provide the kind of capacity and coordination that is necessary to reactivate some of the governance structures. So specifically the National Biological Monitoring Board and regional national wetlands committees. Those are really important, really important spaces for not just information, but bringing together those different stakeholders involved in governance. We're also working more recently on aggregating data into a more accessible national database, as well as exploration of financing mechanisms. Next slide, please. In Jamaica, and I believe there are colleagues here from Jamaica on the call, we've been very privileged to work with the Nature Conservancy Jamaica, University of West Indies, and others. And I would strongly encourage you to look at the NDC 3.0 submitted by the country. There is a real depth of ambition there, both on management, both on increasing conservation areas and restoration for mangroves and seagrasses. We were very fortunate to work with UWI on the first nearshore map of Jamaica's seagrass ecosystems, as well as updating some of the mangrove carbon and mapping assessments. And that's really allowed us to move relatively swiftly towards thinking about the type of financing instruments that might be appropriate. Carbon is very likely to be part of that, but interestingly, there are efforts in country to look at some of the other benefits, including the per capita shoreline defense benefits and the appropriateness there of potentially market-based approaches, but also looking to other maybe insurance models as well. And very clearly trying to make sure that the type of capacity the government needs to include those blue carbon values in their greenhouse gas inventory have longer term support. And finally, in Panama was actually the first country in the region, I believe, to submit their NDC 3.0. The initial NDC went in 2024 and has subsequently been superseded by the country's nature pledge, which includes a great depth of ambition here for coastal wetland ecosystems, both on the restoration, management, and increased conservation area footprint. With Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, Mare Alliance, and very fortunately with our colleagues here at Procaribe, we are already providing, working with partners to support those ambitions, including the country's first national seagrass map by 2027, updating those carbon stock values for mangroves, and a whole series of engagements working not just with Mi Ambiente, but across different government departments, thinking about how we can strengthen some of that connective tissue and knowledge sharing. Finally, this is another country where we're thinking about that sort of ecosystem continuity, looking at peatlands as well. Next slide, please. These are 5 countries within a region that I think can rightly claim to be a kind of global leader in coastal wetland ecosystems. So at the time of presenting, we believe that 19 of the 25 NDCs across the region that have been updated include some reference to blue carbon ecosystems, 9 within the mitigation section, but almost all of them actually within the adaptation section, echoing colleagues' earlier remarks. 12 of those NDCs include very specific targets for mangroves, only 4 at this point for seagrass ecosystems, which is reflective, I think, of a wider gap between the level of understanding for mangroves and seagrasses. We see quite consistently that those mangrove targets are usually more quantitative and focused on specific conservation and restoration outcomes. For seagrasses, there are more qualitative steps needed to get to the science and the understanding and the capacity to a level necessary to outline those more quantitative ambitions. And on the slide here, you'll see there's a couple of examples from Suriname and Colombia. Next slide, please. So a big focus of the work with Procaribe is making sure that these Pew country projects, which are being supported by Procaribe in part, but also understanding how can we strengthen that connective tissue between that core of partnerships and the wider interest in the region. So there's a photo here from a workshop that Procaribe helped us host in Panama City last year, where all 5 of those participating country members were present, but we also had the opportunity to have colleagues from the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, and others, trying to understand what is the role that we can play in building that community of knowledge and sharing lessons learned. What are those common challenges and opportunities where we can move to that goal of implementation and action faster? Next slide, please. That is a real whistle-stop tour of our work in the region, and I would share with you 3 very brief lessons learned. There are more, of course, we're always learning, but there are 3 lessons I would share to this group over the 7 years that we've been working. So you'll note that we've taken a very deliberate approach to partner in country and to really develop those enabling conditions. We're proud of the work, particularly the research, the community outreach, the technical support to government in providing some of the baseline conditions for those policy goals. As it relates to finance, I think a key learning has been that those enabling conditions are absolutely necessary to realizing finance, but often not sufficient in their own right. We can't just assume that finance will flow from that policy baseline. We need to think about, certainly from Pew's side, but I'm sure this is true for others, what are the additional opportunities to more actively be involved in both the design and the execution of financing work. Second learning I would share is that we have always been very focused on blue carbon ecosystems. And we have seen through both our finance and policy work that the importance of not getting too myopic, too singularly focused on blue carbon. In the finance space, beginning in 2019, we observed, like many, there was a huge interest in the potential of blue carbon projects on the voluntary market. And that, I suspect, will continue to play a role. But we've also been engaged in those payment for ecosystem service methodologies, blue bonds, other sovereign approaches to restructuring debt, tourism levies, as well as an increasing interest from the insurance sector. That, I think, is representative of the fact that finance needs to take a similarly broad approach in thinking about the ecosystem service values. And from a policy perspective, as has been touched upon already, there is a heavy majority of countries thinking about these ecosystems first and foremost for adaptation benefits. That is, I think, reflective of values. We know that carbon is important, but also for many frontline communities, carbon is a very abstract concept. We have a wonderful colleague on the team who leads all of our research, who very often says nobody catches carbon. And finally, capacity building, I think, has become a little bit of a truism in conservation work more generally. We're all eager to build capacity, and Pew's, I think, learning of this project is that the capacity is very often there. It's not homogeneous. It takes a lot of time to get your understanding of what is happening on the ground, but we should be looking to strengthen capacity. There are very often baselines, and I would echo Mr. Pickerell's comments at the start of the presentation. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. We need to make sure we take the time to engage and understand with what capacity is already on the ground so that we can think very carefully about how best we can support those country ambitions. Next slide, please. That is a whistle-stop tour from me, but my contact details are here on the slide, and I'm very happy, of course, to engage with anyone further who has additional questions. A big thank you for giving me the time to speak today.
Well, Tom, it was a whistle stop, but it was a very effectively done one. Thank you so much for that. And it's really great to see, as I said in my opening, that people are working at different stages of this cycle from policy to implementation. So it's really great that you're working directly with countries to build these enabling conditions. And then this idea of a community of practice, to see that workshop happening and this experience exchange is quite important. You mentioned that in Belize you have this problem or challenge with land tenure. In Costa Rica, they have payment for ecosystem services scheme. And in Jamaica, you're looking at things like insurance. So, from each country, different stages of development with their Blue NDCs, but also lessons learned that can be applied to other countries earlier on in their Blue NDC journey. And then as well, it's really important to see that the finance that's there is actually quite diverse, or the financial options are quite diverse. It's not just these voluntary markets, there's insurance, there's PES. There are other ways to make sure that finance is reaching people. And I really will never forget this idea that nobody catches carbon. They're catching fish, they're catching oysters, they're catching other things that actually sustain them. So, Tom, thank you so very much. And with that, we are done with the presentations, and we will now move to a brief panel discussion before opening it up for country comments, remarks, and questions. We had an idea for the order in which this panel will go, but I kind of would like to switch it up because we're talking really about the support that countries can receive. So on our panel, of course, we have Directora Ana Paula, we have Micheline, we have Thomas again, we have Gabrielle from Government of France, but we're also introducing Jennifer Hanna Colado, who is Regional Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean for the NDC Partnership Support Unit. Micheline, I think you mentioned NDC Partnership in your presentation. So I think maybe it's a good chance. Jennifer, if you can just give me a hands up if you're okay with this, for me to pose the first question to you. Jennifer, just making sure this is good. I see you unmuted perfectly. And I guess, let's start at the beginning. What is the NDC Partnership Unit, and how can it support countries along their ocean climate journey?
Yeah, no, thank you, Alexander, and I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
It's a little bit loud in the office, but no, thank you for the invitation, and happy to be here and be, let's say, at the end of amazing speakers. And I just have to say thank to Michaela and Tom, because they make my life so much easier. But yeah, it's just like they are the ones that are basically on the ground working directly with the governments and filling those gaps. And this is what the NDC partnership is all about. So for those who don't know what the NDC partnership is a global coalition which was established after the Paris Agreement, basically bringing together at this moment 200 system members, including 144 countries, developed and developing, and more than 110 institutions that work together to deliver ambitious transformational climate action towards the achievement of the Paris Agreement through their NDCs. This is the only global coalition that focuses solely on NDCs. And of course, not forgetting about the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is basically, let's say, a streamlined process managed by what we call the support unit. This is where I am. It works like a broker. So what the partnership does is we work with the countries to highlight and identify those needs and priority that they have already been identified in the NDC. But also we work with the other side of the coin, as we also like to mention, with the partners, who is to maximize those technical and financial resources so we can avoid the duplication and maximize the impact and the impact that we all trying to get here. And basically this is a perfect example of how the partnership works for the NDCs. I think Tom already mentioned this, but it's really good to highlight, and Michele as well. Specifically for the NDC, for this cycle of the NDC, the partnership went through what we call a global call for NDC 3.0 and LTLETs, which was a dedicated window to support the development and submission of the NDC 3.0 of the countries. The partnership mobilized about $78 million in coordinating support from the partners, reaching over 90 countries. And for LAC, I think it was almost 20 from those 33 that we have in the region. And this went from fully, partially, or indicative support. We also have what we call capacity measures, and this is where I'm going to quote Tom. We also believe that capacity is already there. So what we do is deployment of in-country facilitators and embedded advisor, which the goal is basically to strengthen the capacity in developing country members and also foster the in-country coordination and alignment of support. In LAC, we have around 15 in-country facilitators, and at this moment, around 5 embedded advisors. And this embedded advisor can be from any sectors. So recently, what we have more requests is calling for the finance aspect. This doesn't mean that they're not looking into other sectors. We do have some other supports in globally with Blue Carbon entirely, but yeah. That's something that we wanted to highlight, that this is one of the impacts of the partnership. So there's another thing that I wanted to highlight. It is basically the partnership have just finished the first, let's say, 5 years of the program. So now we launch another 5 years from 2026 to 2030. And it is the strategic document that guides the works of the partnership for all members for the next 5 years. So the partnership is guided by the steering committee, composed by developing countries, but also from the institution. And this is basically the result of a lessons learned and basically monitoring evaluation of the past program and looking forward to basically increase what the partnership is meant to be. Basically is work with all our members in achieving those climate targets. So the newer program is divided in 3 what we call impact pathways. One is the acceleration of the implementation through the NDCs, of course. This is the mitigation adaptation aspects of the process. The second is the access to finance, and this is a very much focused aspect of the current, let's say, pathway that we are in globally. And the third one, but not lastly, is the ambitious NDC. Basically is that we know that the NDCs can increase, can be strengthened, and this is like a never-ending enhancement cycle of the process that the countries have already been submitted, but also from the part of how those partners can also support into that process. One thing that I do want to highlight here is that the partnership is driven by the agenda of the country. So the NDC partnership doesn't have a hidden agenda. The country is the ownership of the process. And what we want to highlight is that this newer program emphasizes that engaging with developing countries needs to be within a flexible and multi-year horizon. And basically, what we want to also highlight is that both our country members and our partner members have responsibilities and engagement with the partnership. And basically is from the country side is ownership, is basically this is a process that they want that we want them to be leading, but also from the partner side, what we want to be highlighting is that there needs to be a flexible but also understanding way of submitting those responses. So I'm not going to go into what exactly the partnership does for Blue Carbon, mangrove, everything in that sense. I think Michaela and Tom really highlighted everything that we're doing in that sense. But I do want to highlight that through the partnership and working towards all those impacts pathway, what we want to focus is more into like the mobilization and resource of exactly closing those gaps between exactly the needs, but also the mobilization of the finance. So for this, the partnership has a lot of collective knowledge based on tools, knowledge, products, materials, and basically things and exercises and movement like this webinar, but also peer-to-peer changes, but also it's like, how do we make sure that we keep learning from our past experience and making the best out of it. So one thing that I want to highlight is basically the partnership have worked together with the GCF on developing a climate investment planning and mobilization framework. And it's basically to help the countries and financiers align on what are the key steps and what are the matchmaking process that they need to do at the public, private, international, domestic front to achieve the mitigation adaptation priorities. But with this is like, how I say, it's just like the framework entirely. And because of the need that we have to also target the specific sectors, the partnership has to work with Pew and other members as WRI, UNDP in supplements. And with Pew, we did a climate investment planning for blue carbon ecosystem. And the supplements provides a wider guidance for countries on the full investment cycle. As I mentioned before, lessons learned and establishment of what works, what doesn't necessarily is the best thing to do, but can be depending on the national circumstances of the country, but also trying to understand the other coin of the other side of the coin within the private sector atmosphere. So there's a lot to be done yet, but the good thing is that the partnership is there. Our members are ready to fill in with the support that is needed. And of course, our countries has, with the process of submitting their NDC 3.0, they're moving forward from the design for the implementation. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there, Alex, and happy to answer any questions that may rise. So yeah, thank you.
Again, I hope you get lots of emails with requests support. But Jennifer, thank you so very much for that. You really packed a lot of very useful information into your remarks. I think it's really nice to see how we moved from raising political ambitions, understanding, what support is there from Pew, from WRI. And then, like, let's say you're a country, you say, okay, well, what do I actually do next? Well, next you go to NDC partnership and see how you can connect the different sides of the coin. So thank you so very much for that. And then as well, this idea, and I mean, this is also what we do at the OCM, but many of these projects is reducing duplication to maximize impact. You have all these different ideas going all these different directions. Let's slow down, let's coordinate, let's figure out what's, available and make a plan to proceed. It's also great that you work with in-country facilitators, so people who really understand the place that they're working with to connect some of these outside expertise. And as well, it's always heartening to hear about ownership and how important that is. Just like in my case, our ultimate bosses are the countries, and what countries want and how they want to do things really guide the work that we do. And then you ended with the big question, which is how do we finance this? And that you are also helping countries begin to answer this question of how do I mobilize finance to get some of these exciting things done? So Jennifer, thank you so very much for that. Moving right along to our next question. The ambassador, I think, is no longer with us, but we're very lucky to have Ms. Gabrielle Leclerc at the government of France. Gabrielle, I want to ask you, what has been the overall response to the challenge since it's been launched in Nice? And what kind of concrete actions, next steps do you have planned in the years ahead? So, Gabrielle, if you're with us, the question is for you.
Thank you, Alexander. Merci, Alexander. Si nous avons toujours la traduction, je vais parler en français. Parfait. Et n'hésitez pas à me faire signe s'il y a un problème avec la traduction, dans le cas où j'irai trop vite, par exemple. Nous avons eu une réponse assez positive des États. À chaque conférence majeure, d'autres États ont rejoint le Blue NDC Challenge, donc à l'UNOC, puis à l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies en septembre, ensuite à nouveau lors de la COP30 au Brésil, et même entre ces échéances, on a reçu des réponses de certains pays, donc il y a vraiment un engagement. D'ailleurs, on utilise beaucoup nos ambassades pour vraiment s'assurer que ça réponde bien aux besoins des États et respecter ainsi la logique de l'accord de Paris, dans le sens où cela est vraiment, c'est les États, les pays qui vont s'approprier ce challenge dans leur CDN, dans leur NDC. Et voilà, on a ces réponses que c'est quand même adapté et ça vient répondre à une ambition qui est partagée par beaucoup d'États d'avoir plus d'océans, plus d'environnement dans les négociations climatiques et de renforcer les synergies entre les conférences, entre les processus multilatéraux. On connaît aussi le contexte géopolitique actuel. Bien sûr, hein, on ne peut pas le mettre de côté. Il est ce qu'il est et il est compliqué, il est complexe en tout cas. Et voilà, proposer en fait ces initiatives très concrètes, fondées sur l'action, hein, comme a été aussi le but de l'agenda de l'action de la présidence brésilienne pour la COP30, c'est aussi voilà rappeler que tous ces processus multilatéraux ont un objectif qui est d'avoir de l'impact sur le terrain, d'avoir des résultats concrets pour pouvoir atteindre les objectifs de développement durable, les objectifs bien évidemment de l'accord de Paris, mais aussi d'autres de lier en fait ces processus en se rappelant toujours donc que c'est après au gouvernement de mettre en œuvre ces actions et de décider ce qui est adapté à leur propre situation nationale, bien évidemment. Donc voilà, pour la réponse, en tout cas, elle a été vraiment positive. On a pu aussi avoir des discussions au niveau des experts, grâce notamment à l'investissement des partenaires avec nous, que je remercie encore, et qui ont permis voilà ces partages de connaissances aussi lors de webinaires où on était rassemblés, notamment en amont des COP. Donc ça, c'est vraiment un point positif de ce challenge qui vit vraiment. Ensuite, concernant les prochaines échéances, bien sûr, elles sont nombreuses. Donc, on a parlé en effet de la conférence All Russian dans 2 mois, mais il y a aussi tout plein d'autres moments, en fait, certains auxquels on pense peut-être plus facilement quand on est dans les relations internationales. Je fais partie du ministère des Affaires étrangères, donc c'est vrai qu'on a en tête voilà toutes les COP, évidemment, COP climat, COP biodiversité en fin d'année, l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Mais il y a aussi ces échéances plus locales ou plus régionales. Par exemple, les réunions des conventions de mer régionales, en l'occurrence pour la Caraïbe, il s'agit de la convention de Carthagène, à laquelle j'ai aussi la chance de participer. Alors, il n'y a pas de COP cette année, mais voilà, il y a quand même des réunions des experts, c'est des réseaux qui se mobilisent, et puis tout plein d'autres moments où en fait on peut se retrouver et il faut en fait oser faire ces liens. Parfois, on a un agenda qui est très précis, mais voilà, c'est quand même assez utile de pouvoir rappeler que l'océan en fait qui est transverse à tout plein de sujets, que ce soit le transport maritime, que ce soit l'alimentation, mérite d'avoir sa place. Et voilà, donc évidemment, il n'y a pas de liste définie de toutes les autres échéances, mais c'est certain qu'on va à chaque fois essayer de se mobiliser. Voilà, là, je pense, j'ai en tête en fait récemment le fait qu'on l'ait porté dans des initiatives du G7. Alors, ça concerne pas la Caraïbe, je sais bien, mais voilà, c'est pour vous donner une idée que en fait, c'est à chacun aussi de s'approprier ce challenge. On veut vraiment qu'il soit quelque chose de local, de régional et de global, de lier toutes les échelles. Et je pense que c'est notamment pour ça qu'on a pu avoir une réponse en fait à travers les 5 continents. Et ça, c'est assez encourageant. Voilà, je vais m'arrêter ici. Thank you so much.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for that. It's great to see that the government of France has not stopped ocean diplomacy. In the last decade, you're continuously pushing, and also that you're making this regional. It's always great to see government of France participate, for example, in Cartagena Convention, COPs, so that you're taking it regional, but also global, all the way to the G7. So thank you. I know you're a big part of that ocean diplomacy, and it's great to see it continuing. I know Directora Ana Paula Prates. I think she's still with us, but she may have to leave. So I'm just going to give her a question very quickly. Directora, I wanted to ask you perfect, she gives me the thumbs up. How does the Blue NDC challenge relate to follow-up activities following the Belém conference of the parties that we had last year? So Directora, over to you.
Hello, Alexander, again. Sorry, but I need to leave right in the few minutes. But to respond to this, I think to implement the actions that countries have included in their NDCs, technical support is needed, and we have excellent support for the organizations that are making the Blue NDC Challenge, WER, Ocean Conservancy, Ocean and Climate Platform. But above all, financial support is also necessary. That is why we believe that the Blue NDC Task Force can assist these countries. Of course, as said before about Jennifer, the integrate our Blue NDC challenge into the NDC partnership is also very, very important. That we think that this integrated partnership is very need to support all these things on the mainly the countries. And I can highlight one opportunity is that this year the standing committee on the finance with the team finance climate action in water system and the ocean, I think will provide an excellent opportunity to identify funding gaps for ocean-based actions also. I think it will be held in the September. And as I said, it is important also to support ocean-based initiatives in an international policy, but this must be reflected in and implemented through national policies too. And because that, I think our greatest challenge, mainly for Brazil in this year, in the national level, is ensuring the government continuity for the implementation of our NDC, our National Climate Plan, and our public policy for ocean health. We can move forward. We can't move forward with governments that deny climate change or make war like in this moment we have. So I think we have a lot of challenges, but the multilateral space is very, very important, and we need to strong this space. Thank you. Unfortunately, I need to leave you, but thank you again. Thank you again, Alexander.
Thank you so much, Directora, for those remarks. You've kind of set up the playing field as a Brazilian for somebody like the NDC partnership to play by saying the importance really is action and mobilizing finance. Of course, Gabrielle also acknowledged our challenging global environment, but as she said, diplomacy and the work continues. So thank you so very much for that, Directora, and for your presence here today. All of your time. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Directora. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. I have another question for Micheline. And I just want to say if anybody any participant would like to pose a question, please just pop it in the chat box and I'll be very happy to ask it for you. So Micheline, we've heard so much about this Blue NDC challenge. Now the question, remains, I guess, for countries in particular, if they want to participate in a challenge, which clearly has significant benefits, we've heard today, what would be their next steps? So how do they go about joining the challenge? The question for WRI and Micheline.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's actually quite simple. So it's generally three things. So to join the challenge, members of a prospective government should firstly identify a focal point that can be represented in the member group in the challenge. Email myself or one of the other founding members from the Ocean Conservancy or Ocean and Climate Platform, indicating your interest to join. And lastly is that countries need to include or intend to include ocean-based climate targets or measures in their NDCs or related implementation plans. And so it's really just those three things, and it's a very inclusive group, and so we're really welcoming and encouraging other countries to join, in particular as we're using this time to really gather country priorities so that we can build the right resources for countries, ensuring that there's enough representation there. So thanks so much for that question.
Thank you so much. And I guess you heard it. If you guys join the challenge, you'll have a bigger say in terms of how it's shaped. So thank you so much for that, Michelin. It was very clear what the next steps are. The contact information is there. And if you guys want to contact the OCM, contact us. We'll put you in touch with WRI related to the challenge. I think we have time for one more question if nobody else posts any in the chat box. And I think, Thomas, you're the only person who I haven't asked a panel question yet. So you're up. I noticed in your presentation, Tom, but also in a couple other presentations, there's this distinction between Blue NDCs for adaptation versus mitigation. And it appears that the majority of countries are including these ecosystems in their adaptation section. That's correct. Why are we seeing that? And is that something that we may want to see change in the future? So, Tom, you're up.
Thanks, Alex. I think there's probably two main reasons. So one is quite practical, including these ecosystems in the mitigation section of NDC. It's hard, right? You need data sets, you need MRV, you need effective coordination between the different entities doing that MRV, and that's methodologically rigorous. But it's necessarily rigorous, right? When you start putting anything into your greenhouse gas inventory, when you start thinking about accounting for those values, we get into this idea of equivalence. So, when we're talking about either a policy commitment or carbon as something that's potentially traded between private entities, your 1 unit of carbon for mangroves is the same as your 1 unit of carbon for aviation emissions or whatever else it may be. So there is a necessarily high methodological rigor there, which obviously is not going to be something that all countries are ready to do. That's not to say the ambition isn't there, but the inclusion of these ecosystems in your adaptation section is a kind of good starting point, a stepping stone towards that more kind of rigorous mitigation accounting. But I do think that in our experience, not just in Latin America, Caribbean, but in the Western Indian Ocean, there's a question here of values. So countries, we have a project in Mozambique, which is has a huge coastline, is increasingly subject to cyclones and other erratic weather patterns. The value of mangroves there to local communities and stakeholders is in their shoreline defense, in their water filtration benefits, the fisheries they support. And so I think there's an important point here that we shouldn't just see climate change as an issue of mitigation. Forgive me, I forget the speaker who made this point earlier on, but the best thing we can do for the ocean from a climate change perspective is to reduce emissions. So we need to be very thoughtful, I think, about how we think about the ocean as a mitigation solution, but also not lose sight of the fact that there are a huge number of adaptation benefits that are likely more relevant to people on the front line, and we should be very aware of that in the support that we try to craft.
Tom, thank you so much. That was very clear, and I think that was Directora Prates from Brazil who made that comment. And it's great to see us moving away from just what is financially valuable, for example, in markets, to a more holistic view of nature's contribution to people, which, of course, is in the environmental economics world, the direction that we're heading. This idea that these adaptation, but also other benefits are just as important, but also this idea that we can't shift the brown to the blue by expecting blue carbon or other marine ecosystems to be our primary defense against rising emissions. And that really rising emissions is what we should be focusing on, even though this presents an opportunity for these bundled benefits. So thank you so much for that, Thomas. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box, and I think we are coming towards the end of our time. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to move us towards closing remarks for today's webinar. And, for the other people who've participated in the first 3 webinars, you would have heard a very similar closing remarks. It's a difficult thing to remix 4 times. But, I was first starting off doing this a little bit in an orthodox manner by first thanking the webinar participants. And I mean the people who came to hear what was being said and not those speaking, particularly country representatives. I think your interest in this work is reflective of a rising tide of momentum for the preservation of our invaluable blue or shared ocean and their ecosystems. I would like to thank our presenters and speakers for their time and valuable inputs. By learning what others are doing in the region successfully, we can better understand the path on the map our countries and organizations would like to chart towards more sustainable oceans. So thank you so much to Dr. Tom Pickrell for opening our webinar. Thank you so much for Ambassador Special Envoy Olivier Deavour and Directora Anna Pratis for giving us these country perspectives and really rising our ambitions and encouraging us to go further based on what is being done well by other countries. I would like to thank, of course, Michelin for her technical presentation on why, what, and how of Blue NDCs. And then, of course, Thomas, who just spoke for his overview of work that we are supporting, but Pew is implementing in the wider Caribbean region. I would like to, of course, thank Gabrielle Leclerc. I worked with her and Micheline to co-organize this webinar. So thank you so much for your remarks, but also your hard work behind the scenes in getting things done. And of course, to Jennifer Hanna Collado for showing us, where the money may potentially come from, but also what support exists from the NDC partnership unit. I want to say, and you would have seen this theme in particularly the country presentations from the ambassador and directora, that this webinar is not a stopping point. It's really a springboard to the next actions we will take. I think, and you would have heard this through multiple remarks, by coordinating our efforts, we make better use of limited resources and reduce the risk of fragmentation of efforts. And as somebody working in the wider Caribbean, we're not just talking about limited resources in terms of donor finance, we're talking about time and attention of governments and their personnel. It's really a limited resource for particularly small island developing states. Ultimately, we're here, and I think everybody who's participating and spoke, we are seeking more sustainable outcomes for our marine spaces. But this also requires resources. And we know that SDG 14 has been historically one of the most underfunded SDGs, and the financing gap was highlighted throughout our webinar series. And we're hoping that the action that we're seeing with ocean climate is going to help address that financing gap. So to our participants, to our speakers, with your presence and subsequent action, we want to take advantage of the truth that is more voices, more resources, and more coordinated voices mean more impact and more resources for our wider Caribbean region. On this whole idea of stepping stones, we came from NICIAS here. We're having this webinar series to raise ambitions, to raise awareness around specific topics, looking towards our ocean this year in Kenya, but also the next our ocean, which may be in this part of the world, we're not sure yet, but also the next Oceans Conference. These are all stepping stones, and we're hoping that at each event, we can report on success of countries that have already been working on this topic, but also attract new countries to participate in the challenge. So the next part is particularly important. If you would like to join the Blue NDC Challenge, Micheline would have put our contact information in the chat box. This webinar will also be recorded. If you would like to share this with anybody from the countries that would benefit from the information contained therein. I just want to highlight that we will be having the Ocean Coordination Mechanism in collaboration with the government of Jamaica, both an official and off-site Caribbean-led side event at our Ocean Conference in Kenya. And we believe this will be an excellent opportunity for countries to demonstrate on a global scale their commitment to action. In our first webinar, we heard from the Our Ocean Secretariat about billions that have been mobilized for pledges and promises made at this conference. We want to make sure that some of these resources flow to our region, and the initiatives that we highlighted through this webinar series and beyond are financialized and actioned. So with that, I also would like to thank the Ocean Coordination Mechanism Secretariat, my colleagues, Mariana, Jesus, Angelica, and our director, Mr. Patrick Doubles, for their work done on this conference. And with that, I hope you guys have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. And look out for the recordings of the webinar series and other bits of information related to this topic. So with that, thank you very much. Have a great day, and looking forward to seeing you guys in Kenya or beyond.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander.
And our interpreters, I speak so fast and I always forget to thank them. Thank you so much to our interpreters.